Greetings, travelers, the Green Scorpion here, and it's time I talk about a recent obsession of mine. Every once in a while, something blindsides me and takes up all my thoughts and free time for about a month or so. This past summer, that thing was Octopath Traveler, a much-hyped yet understated RPG on the Nintendo Switch. It's certainly a B-list Square Enix title, not something they put all their resources into like Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts, but it's a loving throwback to the 16-bit era. As someone who's wanted an SNES-style Final Fantasy reboot for 20 years now, I had to check this game out, and in spite of its flaws and bare-bone approach to storytelling, it easily became one of my favorite games of 2018. It has the skeleton of an early Final Fantasy game, but everything about it is a little experimental, from the diorama world of HD pixels to a battle system combining aspects of Persona 5's stagger mechanic and Bravely Default's action management. Oddest of all is the game's focus on 8 entirely separate stories with 8 archetypal protagonists. They're all tropes you've seen before, but somehow the simple charm of all 8 heroes stuck in my heart. This puts Octopath on a shelf for me with Skies of Arcadia, Chrono Trigger, and most of the Tales games, where I love every single member of the party. So today, I'm gonna credit the whole bunch of them by counting down all 8 heroes based on my own personal preference. Both mechanically and narratively, I'll be considering every aspect of the character, their starting class and abilities, their stats, their unique field commands, story, performance, and of course, their character, down to the very last pixel of their model. Since we have 2 less entries than usual, here's a short explanation for those of you not familiar with the game. The paths of these characters are entirely parallel. Each character's story goes through 4 chapters, each with a town segment, a dungeon, and a boss. The plots never converge until a final and, for some reason, optional side quest, and the cutscenes in each story only concern that story's character. The only way to see these characters talk to each other are these occasional side conversations, kinda like the skits in Tales or support conversations in Fire Emblem. Each character is most easily identifiable by their class: warrior, thief, cleric, and so on. As that class, they have 1 or 2 weapons they can use, 7 combat skills, 4 passive support skills, and 1 divine skill. After a certain point in the game, it becomes possible to equip a secondary class to any character, complete with those proficiencies and skills. So on the surface, that means that everything special about that character can be moved to another, but for the sake of this list, I'll be crediting the cool abilities of each class to the character who starts with it, keeping in mind that it's not exclusive to them, but that the ability was designed for them. Be that as it may, each character's stats tailor them to certain roles, and they retain 2 qualities for their use only. One of them is for NPC interaction, like buying items or seducing people, and the other can be anything from occasionally finding misplaced gold to the ability to concoct potions on the fly. Chances are you'll be switching between party members to use them all if you want to get the most out of this game, so if there's someone you don't like, their chapters could be kind of miserable for you. I personally didn't have that problem. Like I said, I love all of these munchkins. So without further ado, these are my top 10... top 8 Octopath Travelers.
You should have studied harder.
If you've played a tabletop RPG, you're probably familiar with a character like Therion. He's your classic chaotic neutral thief, and often decides he's the loner who doesn't want anything to do with the other characters. Well then why are you traveling with them? This is the kind of thing that makes Octopath lose believability. Not only does his journey not concern the others, he specifically doesn't want them around. So, maybe for Therion, it's a good thing that each plot is so segregated. Even then, Therion has the most contrived reason for being on an adventure in the first place: the Fool's Bangle. You can't be serious. This admittedly cool butler guy straps a bracelet on him that only he can take off, so if Therion wants it unlocked, he's gotta go steal these 3 things from 3 different places. Not that the bangle controls him or hurts him or anything, it's just that other thieves will make fun of him if they see it, I guess. This guy's so antisocial, they invented a MacGuffin to get him in the game. Therion was betrayed in the past and can never trust again, coming to a head when he meets up with his old backstabbing partner. I expected another twist when they did this flashback, but it's fine. Therion turns out to be one of the more dynamic characters, as he learns to trust again. You can see this with Cordelia and even in his party conversations. At first he's infuriatingly snarky with all these, "So, this is someone for your past?" "Yeah, they're like family to me." Family's a lie, don't trust them. "Therion, you keep bringing this up, do you want to talk about it?" "No, I'm aloof and mysterious." Dear God, what an edgelord. Given time, Therion does eventually come out of his shell. He's never completely unguarded, but that's okay. I dare say it's kind of subtle, like his relationship with Tressa. A merchant and a thief are bound to have some friction, but they grow to respect each other's appraisal skills. I like that. On the battle side, Therion's the speed demon and can apply debuffs to the enemy. I prefer buffing my own team as opposed to nerfing the opponents, but I do enjoy HP steal and SP steal, which not only help him sustain, but are great for staggering foes if they're weak to daggers. Pour all of your speed items into him and his divine skill becomes an incredible screen nuke. But otherwise, he never really filled a role I needed. Not as much damage as Olberic or Hanit, and not as much utility as Alfyn or Primrose. And yeah, he can pickpocket NPCs, but in early game, it's safer to buy all of those items with Tressa. And if you've been using Tressa, you probably have the money for it. To be fair, he can be really useful. I just never personally needed him. And finally, the worst thing about Therion, freaking lockpicking! Every now and then you'll find a purple chest, which says you don't have the character who can open it. It might as well say, you need Therion, deal with it. And these chests are everywhere. You might think this makes him more rewarding to keep around, but I just feel like he's punishing me for using someone else. What a selfish drama queen. Stop trying to make me like you. And I do like him. He's got some neat moves, and I think his dialogue is witty and sharp. It just comes with a lot more annoyance than anyone else gave me.
Where's the nearest tavern?
Let's go back to the tabletop analogy with another classic stereotype. The cleric. Clerics heal things. They're someone you really want around, but not someone you always want to play as. And seeing Ophilia is a priestess, I went in expecting the usual holier-than-thou type. I was pleasantly surprised. She's a good girl to be sure, maybe the game's most guilty Mary Sue, but... she's so nice! It was chapter 2 when she helps these kids that I knew that she was gonna be okay. She has a way of guiding people to be better without sounding preachy. Maybe because she rarely brings up her religion except with other members of the church. I'd say this is a pretty good take on this kind of story. Ophilia's arc confronts some age-old questions. Why continue to pray when your god doesn't actually do anything? And why do people have to die if there's supposedly some higher power that's supposed to be protecting them? As a man of faith myself, I've lied awake with these quandaries before. I won't say Ophilia's story taught me anything new, but I agree with the answers it comes to. It doesn't cheap out by saying you should just stick to your faith. Rather, you don't need to give up on being a good person just because bad things happen. It's more about hope than divinity, I would say. I realize that I actually like Ophilia's story more than Ophilia herself, but with her kind of attitude, she makes for a good vehicle. And she didn't annoy me like some clerics I could mention. But the real reason she continues to pray? It makes her extremely good in battle. You'll want to find a way to manage her MP, but with her global heal and revive, plus a magic reflecting barrier, she's the best way to keep your party alive. Multiclass her into apothecary and she'll be your one-stop shop for party upkeep. Or invest her in elemental attack. She starts as the only practitioner of light magic, and in the right circumstances, it packs a serious punch. And her divine skill, whoo boy! For a few turns, any character's skills will proc twice. Team her up with a sorcerer and watch the boss's guard gauge whittle away. She might not be strictly fun to use, but I never regret having her around. You're gonna need some healing. It might as well be Ophilia.
The flame guides us true.
Number 6, and we're already in OMG I love him so much territory. Though I was surprised Primrose ended up in the bottom half. She's the fan favorite to be sure and where most players want to start. Gee, I wonder why. But again, let's not judge a book by its lack of cover. This is a 16-bit game after all. The sex appeal is really downplayed. But aside from that, I feel the writers cared a little more about Primrose than the rest of the party members. In this dancer, we see the game's most psychologically complex character. She's on a quest for revenge, but like a Shakespearean hero, she laments that she doesn't know who she is outside of her lust for retribution. Primrose's chapters are the most difficult in two ways. Not only do these ravens take no quarter, the story gets real dark real fast. That chapter 1, man, starting things off by breaking the chains of a maniacal sex-peddling slave runner while he belittles you every step of the way while carrying the baggage of your murdered father and the path that brought you here. Ugh. Just saying, if you came here after recruiting Tressa, it's a pretty brutal tone shift. But while I can appreciate the more adult themes at work here, I think the plotline peaks a little too early. Chapter 1 has a shock factor, and chapters 2 and 3 get down to the psychological stuff, but chapter 4 comes off a bit underwhelming in the end. Because what is there really left to do but kill the guy? The villain is chillingly psychotic, and they were getting really creative with this playhouse sequence, but as a character, Primrose doesn't have any real resolution. I guess that's the idea? A more open-ended game could have done a lot more with this, but I know one thing, she's even worse than Therion in acknowledging the party. Always let's talk about being alone in the world. We're standing right here, you know! I will say though, I like her theming in battle. She's your first source of dark magic, very fitting, and her use of daggers goes well with the whole assassin thing. She needs something easily concealable. Outside of the cool factor though, Dancer is a situational class. Like I said, I like using buffs, but it feels fruitless with their limited duration. Plus the fact that they're single target unless you use her divine skill, which takes up a whole turn and 3 battle points. But it does make for some fun class combinations, and once I unlocked Starcaller, she became real useful for handing out those defensive boosts. She also makes a good sorceress, since she already has the MP regeneration. You have to stretch your brain to reach your full potential, which makes sense for such a cerebral character. Deep, profound, surprisingly tasteful. I think Primrose does a lot of good for this game.
The show is over.
You want to talk about using your brain? Have I got a character for you? The game labels Cyrus as the Scholar, and that's certainly fitting for his role in the story. He's a bookworm, knows a lot about history and the arts, and his field action involves Sherlock-like deductive reasoning. A lot easier than it sounds, actually. But in battle, you'll see him for what he truly is. A wizard. Professor, what's the best way to attack this magical amalgamation? Elementally, my dear Watson. Each party member gets a single element they can use, aside from Olberic, who wouldn't know magic from mustard. But Cyrus comes to class with lightning, ice, and fire in his lesson plan, all of which hit multiple enemies. And if you're willing to invest in some extra SP, he has a spell for each element that hits twice, great for staggering groups. His magical output, and his favorite word, is unparalleled. And not only can he analyze foes to reveal one of their weaknesses, his character-exclusive skill reveals a weakness of each enemy at the start of every battle, which takes a lot of the guesswork out of some random encounters. Consider augmenting him with the Sorcerer class to expand his elemental library even further, or Merchant or Dancer if you want those passives to maintain his MP pool. Now you may notice that I flipped the script this time and talked about his battle prowess first. Well, that's because his personality is... well, he's hard to watch sometimes. He may have an encyclopedic knowledge of all things academic, but when it comes to matters of the heart, he's as dense as an Oxford dictionary. This guy does not take hints well, which is what gets him into this mess in the first place. One of his students has the hots for him, and all he can guess is that she's really invested in her studies. He's also a blowhard and can talk about any subject for hours on end. He's a walking, talking train wreck, and I love him for it. Maybe I just relate to socially naive nerds who give overlong explanations of everything, like, comment, subscribe, but this guy had me laughing from beginning to end. Look at this girl. You can actually hear her interest in him draining as she realizes, wow, this guy is an idiot. But within this humor, I found a good bit of wisdom. No, not that one needs to be well-rounded, because Cyrus couldn't care less about that. It's actually his philosophy on knowledge that brings the character together for me. Cyrus sets out on a death-defying campaign to retrieve an overdue library book, not just because it's a dark tome being used for evil, but because he believes knowledge exists to be shared, not to be hoarded for personal gain. Even the sinister machinations of the occult shouldn't be wiped away from history. Cyrus says it's their duty to inform the next generation of these dangers and how to combat them, not to bury them and pretend they never existed. He is a professor through and through, with my favorite theme song to boot. You may be stuffy and long-winded, Cyrus, but I'd attend your lectures any day. At the very least, I don't think they get boring.
You should have studied harder.
Jokes about social awkwardness aside, the character I end up relating to the most is Alfyn, and I think that's by design. In a story about master thieves and sorcerers supreme, Alfyn is just some guy, the hometown hero of his little village. He's got his passion, he's an apothecary, traveling the land and healing people with his self-made salves, but he doesn't really know what he's doing with his life. It's certainly not as glamorous as revenge or MacGuffin hunting, he's just trying to find himself. But I think that really works for this character without feeling forced. His chapters are more episodic. He meets some people in need, tries to help them, and goes through some gauntlet to get the ingredients he needs. But with this comes some of the game's more engaging scenarios, like this situation with Miguel, where Alfyn has to decide if it's worth it to save the life of a criminal who might do more harm to other people. While his journey doesn't build up to any particularly big finale, I think his character resolves the way it needs to. But I will also admit that he has the weakest connection to the game's big interconnected plot. He just happened to meet this really important guy once. It's not worth docking any points or anything, I just find it funny. As for gameplay, Alfyn's helpful attitude is also omnipresent in his mechanics. His field action lets him basically ask people how their day has been, which is a more reliable way of getting information than Cyrus's deduction skills. And he's got an answer for everything in that satchel of his. This comes up in most of his party conversations. When he's not losing a drinking contest, he's offering his friends the perfect herb for whatever ails them. And this carries right into battle with his concoction abilities, where Alfyn can use these scraps and herbs you've been collecting to heal the party, restore SP, cure any status ailment or inflict it on the enemy, not to mention attack with any of the 6 elements. If they have a magic weakness, Alfyn can hit it. You can't beat that kind of utility. He's also got the single target heals and restores that Ophilia's sorely missing. And what he lacks in offense, he makes up for with ridiculous max health points. Now if only he had some good damage. Oh, look at this! He can poison people! And an Octopath Traveler, that actually works on bosses! After a lifetime of RPGs, I can finally give these monsters a taste of their own medicine.
Ha! Try again!
This one was really close for me because Tressa ticks a lot of the same boxes as Alfyn. She's also in a comparatively low-stakes adventure trying to find her way in the world, and she's also a utility-focused character. But there's a certain spark to Tressa that made her really grow on me, and though she might not have as much utility as Alfyn, what she can do is kind of amazing. Tressa is a merchant, and you'll want her in the party as often as possible if you aim to line your pockets. While she's with you, she'll randomly find heaping piles of cash just sitting around. She also has the ability to buy items off of NPCs, and while Therion's pickpocketing is a more cost-effective approach, Tressa won't risk a fine to restore your reputation. And as you get to higher level, Tressa increases her chances of talking down those prices. This is also how you get some of the best weapons in the game, which are often impossible to steal. In battle, she has a nice array of coverage: lance, bow, and wind magic. Seriously, not enough people have that. But it's those merchant skills you really want. She can dole out extra battle points to the other party members, rest up to shrug off status effects, and she has one of my favorite divine skills, Befelgen's Bounty, which deals a crap ton of magic damage before giving you an equal amount of gold. Yes, please! But no divine skill compares to the most deceptively useful skill in the game, Sidestep. With this, Tressa completely avoids the next physical attack made on her, guaranteed. That alone saved me from a full party wipe on multiple occasions. But why not take this helpful maneuver and exploit it to hell and back? Give Tressa the Rune Lord secondary class, cast Transfer Rune, and now she can make your entire party bulletproof. This is so broken, it's not even funny, it's hilarious. This sweet little kid, she has no idea how overpowered she is. She's just happy to be here. This rambunctious attitude just goes a long way toward lightening the gloomy trends of this game. If you're powering through a particularly heavy story chapter, you can count on Tressa for some refreshing encouragement. She's a friend to the end, always there with a shoulder to cry on and a few thousand leaves she just found on the ground. Don't think it's all fun and games though. Her story is a far cry from Primrose's tragic spiral, but like Cyrus, I found a surprising nugget of philosophy that makes the character interesting. Tressa isn't just in this for the money. She's a firm believer in the importance of merchants. The reason she's so inspired by the journal she found, and why she hates thieves so much, is because she appreciates every product she sells, the passion that the craftsmen put into it, the happiness that it brings the customer, and her duty as a merchant to see the item safely to its new home. Wow, I've never felt so good about consumerism before. Yeah, it's hokey as hell, but I was smiling from ear to ear the whole time. Tressa, you sold me on this journey.
How's that?
To some people, this is the end of the video. As soon as I reveal my runner-up, process of elimination will tell you who's number 1. But I pray you neglect that for a moment because these characters are still well deserving of your time. When you boot up Octopath Traveler, you're asked to choose your main hero based only on a brief description, not a lot to go off of. And in one of the game's more baffling design choices, you'll be forced to use that character in any party for most of your playtime. Most people I talk to about the game end up rather attached to their first character, and for me, that character is Hanit. Your main will inevitably grow 20 or so levels past your other characters anyway, so it's easy to appreciate them for their seemingly superior stats. But even without that advantage, I think Hanit would still end up among my favorites. I generally like the ranger type characters in RPGs, and as a hunter, Hanit fills that niche with some awesome bow skills and a cuddly snow leopard companion. She hits hard with an emphasis on physical attack and critical hits, her support skills focus on giving her extra actions, and she can volley arrows on all opponents, so she excels at staggering and finishing off her prey. The real game changer for Hanit, however, is her ability to capture and command wild animals. She's like a Pokemon trainer, just with limited uses for each monster. There's a % chance for catching the beast, which increases if you expend battle points or if they're at lower health, and depending on the species, they might attack with a certain weapon attribute, cast an elemental spell, cause status effects, or even heal and buff the party. Some hit multiple times, some hit everyone, and if you take the time to learn your favorites, Hanit becomes nearly as versatile as Alfyn. Then there's her field action. To get into some buildings, you need to use an action to fight someone standing guard. Hanit's version of this makes you fight them exclusively with the animals you've collected, which to me was always more fun. Plus, I love the reactions some of these villagers have when you suddenly sick a panther on them. Speaking of reactions, apparently a lot of people really hate Hanit's speech patterns. Or should I say, they haten them. The people of Hanit's tribe speak in a tongue most strange, alike to Shakespearean English, within some things made up thrown betwixt, making not much sense to some, nowhere else in the game wilt thou find in anything like it. Soundin' annoying? I blame thee not. But personally, I think it's kind of cool. It demonstrates just how secluded these people are supposed to be, which is a big part of Hanit's character. She just doesn't get people. You can compare her to Cyrus, I suppose, good at what they do but terrible at interpreting social cues. Except in Hanit's case, she knows this is her weak spot. So rather than pomposity, you get moments where this badass huntress gets all awkward and flustered. It's kind of adorable. Okay, fine, you caught me. I think she's really cute. Current standings are Lyn, then Ibuki, then Hanit. Don't go blabbing to Ignis, she already knows this. I can't feel too bad crushing, though, when I feel her story is honestly pretty well told. You're hunting the biggest, baddest monster of them all, that's a good hook. But along the way, you learn about Hanit's relationship with the master she's trying to save. The two are so different in personality, but love each other like family. And family is a big motivator for me too, so having a parental figure playing such an important role in this story, without ever overshadowing or taking agency for the main character, I was totally on board. And at the end, her master hugs her, and Hanit's really weird about it. It's so cute. Strong, confident, adorable, beautiful. Just gonna say it. Best girl in Octopath Traveler.
Thou didst fight with courage.
Battle points, weaknesses, staggering. For all the strategy involved in this game, how is it that my favorite character is the guy who just hits things? Taking the top spot is Olberic the Warrior. On the surface, he's your typical fighter, what a D&D book might present as a beginner's character template. He's got a sword and a spear, he's tanky, and he's got a few moves to help him dish out extra damage. No offensive magic to be seen, it's all about that weapon damage. But Octopath doesn't portray Olberic the way I'm used to seeing these characters. He's not the team lug, the idiot who's there to contrast the smarter characters. Actually, now that I think about it, none of these characters are dumb. Olberic may be old-fashioned, but he's cunning and intelligent. Therion even remarks that he'd make a good thief if his morals were looser. This, on top of him being the oldest member of the party, gives him the kind of wisdom I always like in melee specialists, like a lot of my favorite berserkers. But Olberic's no berserker. He is a royal knight. Sure, this comes with its own cliches, however the typical lawful good chivalry is immediately tested by his backstory. The kingdom he swore to protect has fallen, and now Olberic wanders the globe as a knight errant, with years of battlefield experience and nothing to do with it. For the past few years, all he can think of is his old friend Erhardt, who betrayed him and killed his king. His moral opposite in a way, a knight just as skilled, but who forsook his devotion. Olberic's path starts as a revenge tale, with Olberic tracking down Erhardt by putting his sword to a number of tasks, mercenary work, a fighting tournament, neither of which Olberic considers a worthy use of his blade, yet justified in his quest to punish Erhardt and get some answers. But as the story goes on, Olberic realizes his want for revenge pales in comparison for his need for meaning. He really doesn't know what to do with himself without his king. He busies himself chasing Erhardt, but like Primrose, where will that leave him when he's done? Devoid of meaning again. On his journey, he constantly asks himself what the purpose of a sword is, why he fights. And by the end, he gets a fitting, if predictable, resolution. The journey's better than the destination, though. Olberic surprisingly has the most variety in his story than any other character, the two standout moments being the fighting tournament and when you finally meet Earhart. It's not the most complex story in the world, but Olberic's conviction and the weight of his struggle are felt through a mythic voice performance by Patrick Sykes. Yeah, he's Hector from Fire Emblem Heroes, I was bound to like this guy.
Oh-ho!
But not only do I think Olberic has the strongest character in the game, he's also the strongest character in the game. Offensive or defensive, he's your guy when it comes to physical combat. He gets the guard skill very quickly, which veterans of 16-bit Final Fantasy games might recognize. His divine skill, Brand's Thunder, is just a massive bomb on a single target, and his ridiculous attack stat makes him the perfect candidate for the War Master class. Me and War Master Olberic, ooh boy did we have some fun. But it never quite got into bloodthirsty territory. Olberic's regality and chivalry keep him high class, and I think having a crazed barbarian would clash with Octopath's strategic gameplay. Olberic's a man who chooses his attacks carefully. He's smart, he's strong, and he's got a heart of mithril plate mail. A true knight to the end, the legacy of Hornburg is easily my #1 Octopath traveler. Thank you Square for making such a lovable cast and such an interesting RPG. If Bravely Default could get a sequel, you guys think you can come back to this? Fix up some problems, maybe make the story a little more entwined? And a more satisfying postgame would be nice too, screw this boss rush! But until then, thank you all for watching. I'm the Green Scorpion, and did you know that the first letters of all their names spell Octopath?